Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Elite Charities of Christ, and I am a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Cross Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 79, recovering Lumen Gentium 41 on the unity of holiness. This is the longest of the year because I didn't break up paragraphs, and this paragraph is almost 1,100 words. I will be a little lighter on the commentary, but we might still go over the 15-minute kind of that I try and have as a stop. But anyways, we're continuing on Chapter 5, the Universal Call to Holiness, Chapter 5, Lumen Gentium. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican and frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday we began this chapter talking about how each Christian is called to holiness by Jesus based on his work, and Jesus united himself to his church to make her holy. Today we're going to talk about many different roles, but holiness in each one. And it also enumerates in several paragraphs exactly how to be holy in certain ones. So this paragraph 41 we're covering today, has 7 subparagraphs. So 1 and A and G, the first and last, are basically like the unity of holiness, and all could be holy no matter the circumstances. But in between, we have B, talking about bishops, how they ought to be holy by leading God's people in holiness. C is about priests, live holiness in our vocation, right? D is about holiness for those assisting priests and bishops. E, many ways to be holy in the lay vocation through love. F is striving for holiness even amidst suffering. And then G, all can be holy, right? So as you notice, this kind of starts and ends with that universality, and then it talks about it in different subsets is the kind of outline of these subparagraphs. So let's get straight into 41a. The classes and duties of life are many, but holiness is one. That sanctity which is cultivated by all who are moved by the Spirit of God and who obey the voice of the Father and worship God the Father in spirit and truth. These people follow the poor Christ, the humble and cross-bearing Christ, in order to be worthy of being sharers in his glory. Every person must walk unhesitatingly according to his own personal gifts and duties in the path of living faith, which arouses hope and works through charity. So, right, this is a theme we've been covering. We covered yesterday, and we're really repeating, right, this idea of each calling to be holiness, each called to take up our own cross, which are going to be different, each called to use our own gifts, right? So, there's oftentimes being autistic is a cross, I have to bear it, and that's life, right? I have other crosses. I've been doing physical therapy because I had a little accident on my bicycle a year ago, and that's a cross to bear as well, right? And different things like that are all cross to bear. But I also have gifts. Obviously, you can kind of see what some of them, like teaching and things like that, explaining theology in ways that an average person can understand, right? So I'm trying to use them. I'm just giving myself as an example, but I'm sure other people, I can think of people, siblings of mine or friends who are lay people, friends who are priests or religious as well. So 41b is talking about how bishops ought to lead God's people to holiness. So let's read it. In the first place, the shepherds of Christ's flock must holily and eagerly, humbly, and courageously carry out their ministry, in imitation of the eternal high priest, the shepherd and guardian of our souls. They ought to fulfill this duty in such a way that it will be the principal means also of their own sanctification. Those chosen for the fullness of the priesthood are granted the ability of exercising the perfect duty of pastoral charity by the grace of the sacrament of orders. This perfect duty of pastoral charity is exercised in every form of episcopal care and service, prayer, sacrifice, and preaching. By the same sacramental grace, they are given the courage necessary to lay down their lives for their sheep, and the ability of promoting greater holiness in the church by the daily example have become a pattern for their flock. So just before a summary, 2 words there. 1, episcopal just means, an adjective related to bishops, and then holily. That was a tough one to pronounce. I don't read these out loud beforehand, and I can tell, hey, that's like the adverbial form of holy, but it sounded awkward. Anyway, so bishops need to lead in holiness, right? The first duty of a bishop is to be holy, right? That's the first thing. If a bishop comes in and he's new to the diocese, what's your first priority? I'm going to be holy. What's your second priority? I'm going to help others be holy, right? And that's really what they want to do. And, fulfilling other aspects of their duty as a bishop kind of make them holy, right? So if a bishop is there and he's teaching his flock, explaining church teaching, he's getting a lot of input from different priests and different, lay people in different parishes to make decisions about, hey, which priest, we need a new pastor for this parish, who should I appoint? How should we move priests around? Things like that, right? And then the charity on their service, right? They should have charity, that perfect charity in their service. It's really a great example when you see bishops kind of secretly going and doing little things with charity, whether it's helping at the soup kitchen or visiting the, people in the hospital, things like that. And ultimately, the bishop should be ready to lay down his life for his sheep, right? Like the good shepherd, they are our shepherds. The good shepherd will lay down his life for his sheep, right? That's what Jesus said. So bishops, I know it's tough, but that's what you should be ready to do. So 41C is about priests living holiness in our vocation, right? As priests. I'm a priest. For most of you, it would probably be their vocation, but I am a priest, so I include that. So let's read it. Priests who resemble bishops to a certain degree in the participation of the sacrament of orders, for in the spiritual crown of the bishops. They participate in the grace of their office, and they should grow daily in their love of God and their neighbor. By the exercise of their office through Christ, the eternal and unique mediator. They should preserve the bond of priestly communion, and they should abound in every spiritual good, and thus present to all men a living witness to God. All this they should do in enumeration of these priests who often, down through the course of centuries, left an outstanding example of holiness, of the holiness of humble and hidden service. Their praise lives on in the Church of God. By the very office of praying and offering sacrifice for their own people and the entire people of God, they should rise to greater holiness. Keeping in mind what they are doing and imitating what they are handling, these priests in their apostolic labors, rather than being ensnared by the perils and hardships, should rather rise to greater holiness through these perils and hardships. They should ever nourish and strengthen their action from an abundance of contemplation, doing all this for their comfort of the entire Church of God. All priests, and especially those who are called diocesan priests, due to the special title of their ordination, should keep continually before their minds the fact that their faithful loyalty toward their generous cooperation with the bishop was the greatest value in their growth in holiness. So, right, that is about the priesthood, right? This should really attract young men who might be called, right? That idea of laying down your life for the others, serving, sacrificing, living in that secret service where, yes, you are a saint, but you never get canonized because you're kind of hidden in the parish, hidden in the confessional, not the one that's known all across the world, even if, there is that love for you in that local area. And then at the end, it talks about diocesan priests. So the diocesan priests are the ones who are for the diocese. The other ones are religious priests like myself. So usually you'll see diocesan priests won't have many letters after their name except for degrees, whereas us religious priests will have letters like LC for Legions of Christ, OFM for Franciscans, OP for Dominicans, SJ for Jesuits, things like that, right? And that indicates our community. And so we still have to have that unity with our bishop. I still have to have unity with the bishop. But my first superior, the one who gives me my assignment, is my own religious superior, not the bishop. So that's a slight difference thing, right? And that's just the difference between diocesan and religious priests, right? But this idea here is this sacrifice helping others. We as priests, right, we offer the sacrifice in the altar, but the rest of our lives need to be a sacrifice as well. And that's part of how we become holy, is sacrifice ourselves through those various things, right? Through our lives, right? And that's very valuable, not just saying, hey, it's a nice thing, you have a beautiful home, the beautiful thing about sacrifice. No. Like, it's a sacrifice when, somebody's dying, we get that text, the pager at 2 a.m., we have to go to the hospital for anointing or something like that, right? Or it's a sacrifice, when you have to move across, when we've built up all these relationships and we get assigned across the city or diocese or across the country, we have to say goodbye to certain relationships. That's tough, right? Those are the sacrifices we make in our vocation. So let's move on to 41B, D is in dog, 41D is in dog. Holiness for those who are assisting priests and deacons. So it's talking about different ministers, both lay and deacons. So let's read it. Ministers of lesser rank are also sharers in the mission of the grace of the supreme priest. In the first place among these ministers are deacons, who, inasmuch as they are dispensers of Christ's mysteries and servants of the church, should keep themselves free from every vice and stand before men as personifications of goodness and friends of God. Clerics who are called by God and are set aside as his portion in order to prepare themselves for the various ministerial offices under the watchful eye of spiritual shepherds are bound to bring their hearts and minds into accord with the special election which is theirs. They will accomplish by their constant prayer, by their burning love, and by their unremitting reconciliation of whatever is true, just, and of good repute. They will accomplish all this for the glory and honor of God. Besides these already named, there are also laymen chosen by God and called by bishops. These laymen spend themselves completely in apostolic labors, working the Lord's field with much success. So, right, pretty straightforward. One little note here about clerics. The idea of clerics are those in the clerical state. You enter the clerical state by the ordination of diaconates or deacons, priests, and bishops, but it is not a necessarily permanent state in the sense that if you are laicized, if you do something scandalous, or if you request to leave the priesthood, you lose the clerical state. You're no longer a cleric. So the clerics, in this sense, is about the practice of such ministries, not just that you are ordained. So like people who've left the priesthood, they're no longer clerics in this sense, right? So this is talking about all those who are assisting the priest, right? All of them need to strive for holiness too, right? We have so many who do so much good work. We have, people who teach religious education, sacristans, people doing the music, people doing this, that, the other thing. It's all amazing. I've taught in the seminary, and there's some lay professors who are great teaching the seminarians and things like that. It's great. And, we need to help become holy through doing that ministry, right? It's not just like, oh, I have I have the mission to this ministry. Oh, I'm so great. No, how do I do that ministry? That's how I'm going to become holy, right? So my superior gives me an assignment. Hey, go and teach at the seminary. And how am I going to become holy? By being the best theology teacher at that seminary, talking to all the seminarians, encouraging them to holiness, helping them strive to do all those things so that they are going to be the saints that God is calling them to be. And they're obviously not going to be the saints that I'm called to be because they're different than me. Anyway, so let's continue on with 41E. Many ways to be holy in the lay vocations through love is the theme of this one. So let's read it. Furthermore, married couples and Christian parents should follow their own proper path to holiness by faithful love. They should sustain one another in grace through the entire length of their lives. They should imbue their offspring, lovingly welcomed as God's gifts, with Christian doctrine and their evangelical virtues. In this manner, they offer all men the example of unwearying and generous love. In this way, they build up the brotherhood of charity. In so doing, they stand as witnesses and cooperators in the fruitfulness of Holy Mother Church. By such lives, they are a sign and a participation in that very love with which Christ loved his bride and for which he delivered himself up for her. A like example, but one given a different way, is that offered by widows and single people who are able to make great contributions towards holiness and apostolic endeavor in the church. Finally, those who engage in labor, and frequently in its heavy nature, should better themselves by their human labors. They should be of aid to their fellow citizens. They should raise all society, even creation itself, to a better mode of existence. Indeed, they should imitate by their lively charity and the joyous hope and by their voluntary sharing of each other's burdens, the very Christ who plied his hands with the carpenter's tools and who in union with his Father is continually working for the salvation of men. In this, then, their daily work should climb to the heights of holiness and apostolic activity. Right, so there's three subsections of this subparagraph, right? So the first one is about that, that faithful love in marriage, right? The couples loving each other and loving their offspring. I think that it's wonderful when we see couples who've been faithful for a long time. My parents are getting close to 50 years. They're between 45 and 50 right now. And so it's like those kind of examples, you see them still in love with each other. And that's the kind of example that's going to move people, I think, so much towards that love, right? Because we can talk all we want about the wonder of married love, but it is those examples of those people who've been married 30, 40, 50 years where you see and you're like, wow, this is something that somebody in their 20s is like, I want to have that when I'm 30, 40, 50 years in the future, right? And that's what I want to have with my spouse. And the charity is, first of all, to the family, but not just the family, right? The second thing here is about the singleness or widowedness and how that could be a path to holiness. I know a number of single people not in formal forms of consecrated life of the church that are still, striving towards holiness, right? And things like that. And then finally, working can sanctify us, right? We're doing that hard work and things like that. John Paul II really went in depth on this in his encyclical Laborum Exercens. And this is kind of a foretaste of that. And that idea of work building up society, building up creation, right? So we make wonderful things. We don't just destroy the earth. We elevate the earth in what we do, hopefully. So let's move on to 41F, in striving for holiness even in our suffering. Let's read it. May all those who are weighed down with poverty, infirmity, and sickness, as well as those who must bear various hardships or suffer persecution for justice' sake, may they all know they are united with the suffering of Christ in a special way for the salvation of the world. The Lord called them blessed in his gospel, and they are those whom the God of all graces, who has called us unto his eternal glory in Christ Jesus, will himself, after we have suffered a little while, perfect, strengthen, and establish. Right? So our suffering can unite us with Jesus. That's a real challenge. Sometimes you think, suffering is it's all negative. No, it is negative. Yeah. I mean, it's like, it sucks that somebody got their wisdom teeth removed and they're in pain today, right? Nobody's like, oh, wow, yay, great. No. But how do we offer it up? What do we do with it, right? Do we offer up and say, hey, Jesus, I offer this up for soul. I offer this up for vocation. I offer it up for people who are struggling to stay faithful to their spouse today, right? What are we doing with it? Because it's by that offering up of suffering we can strive to become holiness. And we strive to become holy, right? Jesus blessed these people as well, right? That last thing where he says, hey, he's going to bless and elevate these people who are doing this. So finally, 41G on all can be holy no matter the circumstances, which is pretty straightforward. Finally, all Christ faithful, whatever be the conditions, duties, and circumstances of their lives, and indeed through all these will daily increase in holiness if they receive all things with faith from the hand of the Heavenly Father, and if they cooperate with the divine will. In this temporal service, they will manifest to all men the love with which God loved the world. This is it, right? This is the whole thing this whole chapter is about that each of us can be holy each day. We should move towards holiness each day, right? How do we do it? We surrender to God's will. We serve others. We show God's love to others. This is the kind of reality we have, right? We need to put everything in God's hands, trust him, hope in him, bring him to others, and through that, we grow in holiness. He is the one who makes us holy, and we just need to trust in him, put all our trust in him, confide in his will. So thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a year. I only went like 2 minutes over the 15-minute general end, with this one being super long. This is a listener-supported podcast. You can donate to help StarQuest produce another great podcast at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow we're going to continue with the next paragraphs of Lumen Gentium, which is paragraph 42 on the divine invitation to be holy. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on the podcast, such as playlists of individual documents and a reading plan.
Amen.